introduce myself too. So hi, I'm Jacquelyn Shelton. I'm currently a postdoc at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and I'll be telling you a lot about our super cool work entitled Deep Learning and Energy Models for Fine Wood Segmentation. Sorry, dead wood. This is a collaborative work with my amazing colleagues here. So 3 of them, so me and the second one, we're at the Hong Kong Polytechnic. Pranishwav is at TomTom, and Marco Hoyt is at the National Bavarian Forest, National Bioschutzwald. So we have a domain expert with us. So to set the stage for this work, let's consider this simple illustration of the carbon cycle. So the carbon cycle can be understood as the flow of carbon in various forms between different reservoirs, such as the Earth's atmospheres, oceans, and land ecosystems. Changes in the carbon cycle can have many consequences for the Earth's climate. For example, too much carbon in the atmosphere warms the planet, too much activity, carbon-based greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, hollow carbons. We know this. So, but why are we even looking at dead trees? So forests are the most efficient ecosystem on the planet for scrubbing CO2 and turning it into oxygen, sequestering as much CO2 as all of the Earth's oceans. Dead trees are an important part of forest ecology. Like other trees, they sequester carbon, which would otherwise travel to the atmosphere, form greenhouse gases. A total of 8.5% of the atmosphere's carbon is stored within dead trees. They also play an active role in biodiversity by providing habitat to 1/3 of plant and animal species living in the forest. An ecosystem's biodiversity is directly linked to its stability and ability to withstand climate change. So for all of these reasons, it's very important to have accurate ways to monitor dead wood, measure the dead tree quantity and type. So just to say, anyone interrupt me at any point, and I think this is too long, so if you want me to speed along with some parts, let's make this interactive. Okay. So, as for data, large-scale mapping of dead wood can be accomplished based on high-resolution remote sensing aerial imagery. Specifically, chlorophyll has high reflectance in the near-infrared spectral band, which can serve as a basis for distinguishing between living and dead vegetation. So this figure here shows some sample living and dead trees where gray is dead. All these are dead trees seen from above, and red is undead, alive. So this study uses color infrared imagery, which is a mixture of visible and near infrared spectral bands. Our study area lies in the Bavarian Forest National Park, which is located in southeast Germany, as one would expect if it's Bavarian. It consists mostly of Norway spruce and European beech trees, and is well suited for dead wood studies because it suffered a heavy bark beetle infestation, which resulted in the destruction of nearly 5,800 hectares of spruce stems. The dead wood was left as is within the national park for reasons of scientific purposes and studies and such. So all of this gray stuff that you see, that's all dead. In the particular, the data we're using came from a flight campaign in June 2017. We are using from, it consists of approximately 2,500 images, where each image pixel represents 10 by 10 centimeters. And this is basically the route it took. Each of these little dots is a picture it took. So it has over 14,000 by 25 pixels, representing 3.7 square kilometers of forest. So very high resolution stuff here. Since these images overlap, they can be stitched together to form this high resolution image of the status of the entire region in CIR format. So before we jump into our approach, let's first get on the same page and review some basic segmentation tasks, each which aims to tackle a different problem. This is probably a review for some of you, if not, whatever, it looks cool. So classification seeks to determine whether an object is present in an image or not. So in this case, is there a balloon? There's not a balloon. Semantic segmentation seeks to find all of the pixels that belong to an object of interest, in this case, balloons. And object detection seeks to find the quantity and location of all the objects, in this case, to detect all 7 balloons. And finally, we have instance segmentation, where the goal is to identify all of the pixels that belong to each object. So this is our ultimate goal. We want to identify the pixels of each dead tree, crown we call them because we're seeing them from above and they look like a crown, in a given image, thereby also acquiring their respective contours. So as we see here, these guys are overlapping. So that's something that we are going to have to account for. And when we considered forest images, because trees do not respect boundaries, they will overlap. And this is not a trivial problem to deal with. So how are we going to approach and tackle this segmentation problem? Here we have a toy illustration of the entire pipeline of our approach, which we'll work through bit by bit in this talk. So bear with me or speed me along, whatever. So first, let's break down the problem into its basic components. This approach, oops, sorry. Yeah, next we recognize that we can employ state-of-the-art deep learning methods in order to form the building blocks of our approach. So here on the left, we have a nice CIR image of some tree trunks or crowns within the forest. So we then apply semantic segmentation to the input image using UNet, which is a convolutional neural network. I'll explain that in a moment, in order to get the class probability maps. So that's these guys here. Simultaneously, we do instance segmentation on the same input using mask RCNN to acquire estimates of the tree counts and locations, these blobs with little centers. Yeah, that gets us the counts and the locations. So using these two inputs, the deadwood class probability map and likely, I need a drink of water. Okay, so using these two inputs, the deadwood class probability map and likely tree location information from these two, we formulate an aggregate multi-term energy model, which is shown here so colorfully in green, to produce the instance segmentation with the refined contours representing the dead tree crowns. So this approach leverages two state-of-the-art deep learning architectures and will incorporate prior knowledge about the target shape. So this is our goal, tree crown contours. So the image term of our energy will capture the way the dead tree crowns appear in the image in the sense of pixel color. For this purpose, we use the UNet, which is a deep network from the class of fully convolutional neural nets, which follows the encoder-decoder architecture. The UNet performs dense semantic segmentation. In other words, for each pixel, it returns a class posterior probability. So this network in particular is suited to our task, since it is known to preserve fine object details, which is visible in this picture. The UNet is a classic architecture within the class of fully convolutional neural networks, which is dedicated to the task of dense semantic segmentation. So it consists of two symmetric parts, which give rise to the U shape, which you're going to see. The downsampling, upsampling, or encoding path uses max pooling, so that's going down here, to gradually downsample the input and condense into a lower dimensional representation with convolutional filters. And the upsampling or decoding path employs transposed convolutions to reverse the downsampling and eventually get back to the original image resolution. The final upsampled image is fed into a softmax layer with a logistic loss to obtain the class probabilities. up here. In our case, we classify the pixels as either background or belonging to a dead tree crown. So as a side note, unite can also be used for regression, where to do so, we remove the soft max layer at the end of the network, which is what gave us those class probabilities to begin with, and we replace it with a logistic loss. We replace the logistic loss with squared error loss directly on the output of this network's final layer, which we have done in previous work in order to predict dense estimates of atmosphere pollutants. Had that at Climate Informatics last year. So these things can do some pretty cool stuff. So now we build the next energy term in our approach, which is responsible for finding the location of the object contours, which is illustrated here again, where we now have various pixel blobs corresponding to the class posteriors computed from the unit above, and where each x inside each of these blobs denotes the centroid of that object, in our case, the center of that tree. These centroids are obtained from another state-of-the-art deep learning segmentation network called mask RCNN. While these masks are not precise enough to accurately delineate the complex and intricate shapes of tree crowns, as we'll see in the experiment section, the centroids of these masks provide high-quality estimates of actual tree centers. Oh, skip ahead. So these centroids yield important prior knowledge that allow our energy formulation to constrain the modeled shape to stay around promising tree crown locations. So the mask RCNN represents a state-of-the-art and generic image instance segmentation. So at a high level, it consists of two major components. The region proposal network, or RPN, is a lightweight neural network that efficiently scans the input image in a sliding window fashion, this part, and finds areas that are likely to contain objects, so regions of interest, ROIs. The RPN provides coarse estimates of object positions to the second component, which is responsible for verifying if the region actually contains a target object and classifying it, generating a binary mask representing that object's pixels. So that would be a tree that hopefully we've identified, and note these guys are overlapping. The mask RCNN can be seen as an example of a funnel architecture where the performant RPN tells the more computationally expensive refinement component where to look for the promising regions of interest. Okay. So let's formalize things and begin building our multi-term energy model piece by piece. So consider a two-dimensional image plane omega and a d-dimensional image I defined on that plane. Next, consider a shaped contour evolving within the image. So we can see that would be a contour that is evolving, simple illustration. Into two regions, into the foreground and the background. So the foreground is omega f, and that's the background, and the contour, which I just showed you. So in this case, the quality of the partition can be expressed probabilistically using Bayes' rule. Alternatively, by applying the log, we can express the product of probabilities as a sum of energy terms. So however you like to think about it, tomato, potato, in order to find the contour configuration with a maximum a posteriori, we minimize this term or maximize that one, however you like. The shape and image terms can be thought of as models of our prior knowledge about the geometric properties of our target shapes, as well as the appearance in terms of pixel colors within the image. So that's these terms here. But remember, we only have one contour, so things are simple at this point. So first, let's explore the image term. Intuitively, it quantifies our knowledge about what an image would look like if we knew the location and shape of our target object. For simplicity, let's assume that the labeling of the foreground and background regions are independent, so that the probability of observing the image given both regions factor into two specific region-specific probabilities. The indicator symbol for region X denotes the, we're going to write the log probability of the whole image as a sum over all image pixels of their respective region-specific probabilities. The indicator symbol for region X denotes the membership of a pixel in that region. As there are only two regions and they form a partition, background, foreground, membership of a pixel in the background is equal to 1 minus the membership in the foreground. So indicator. Okay. We can further simplify this expression by discarding the constant terms related to, I feel like I'm going into like arithmetic, so if you want to speed along to other things, I can, or I can keep going. Okay, zombies. So we can further simplify this expression by discarding the constant term related to the value of multiplying out the 1 from the parentheses, because it doesn't depend on the contour and can therefore just be ignored in the optimization. So bye. And we assume that observing foreground versus background is equally probable. So in other words, we assume a flat prior on the region membership. By using the conditional probability formula, we can then rewrite the ratio of class conditional model of pixel intensities as a ratio of region posterior probabilities given the intensities. In a two-class setting, the posterior probability of background class is equal to 1 minus the foreground posterior, and this means that the image term is completely specified by a discriminative model in the region given pixel intensities. So this is where we're using the U-net in this role. Moment. So the pictures below show the Deadwood class probability map for a sample forest scene. So this is a sample CIR image, actually taken from the forest, where high intensity pixels correspond to the dead tree crowns here, and the background is dark. So this captures our intuition that a contour will have low image energy when, this captures our intuition that contour will have low image energy when most of the pixels inside the contour are white and pixels outside the contour are black. So this one obviously is not doing so well. And this one is capturing most of the pixels of those tree crowns. So we'll now move on to the shape term of the energy. So we'll let G denote a smooth approximation to the foreground region indicator function. And let G denote, oh, I already said that. G is parameterized by a vector shape coefficient alpha and a center position xy. This function G can be thought of as instantiating the contour with the shape described by alpha, centered at xy in the image. The shape term, or the log shape probability, depends only on the shape coefficients alpha, but not on the location xy. In the canonical setting, all locations are deemed equally likely within the image. So we don't have any prior knowledge yet. We don't need it yet. So let's construct a probability model in a non-parametric fashion for the shape coefficient vector alpha. So alpha might be high dimensional to model the joint probability of the whole vector directly, too high dimensional. Therefore, it's better to express the probability in terms of similarity to training shapes in a non-parametric fashion. So given a database of training shapes with their associated shape coefficient vectors, we can then express the probability of observing a new shape coefficient vector as a normalized sum of similarities to training shape vectors as measured by this kernel function K. Try not to use this too much because I guess it's not visible for those in the internets. Under this model, the probability density in regions of the shape coefficient space around the training samples will be high. So that would be these little training samples black with the little kind of sausage shape around it. Conversely, it will quickly drop towards 0 as the shape coefficient grows less similar to any shape seen during training. So they're given, less probability. The problem we're really interested in is simultaneously modeling multiple contours, such as many trees within the forest. So we'll take the single contour model and extend it to multiple simultaneously evolving contours. Each of them is parameterized by its own shape coefficient vector and center position. Just like before, we can write the joint probability of the contours in terms of the image and shape terms. So this is the same thing, we're just generalizing it to the more complicated case. And these are contours that are overlapping, so this segmentation is not great. So this time the shape term needs to account for the fact that the evolving contours are not independent. We want the joint contour model to penalize overlapping contours. So consider tree crowns overlapping each other in the previous picture. We want to penalize those. Also, we want to include our prior knowledge about probable locations of tree crowns obtained from the mask RCNN. So that gave us a good idea of where there's probably tree crowns. And keep the position independent part of the prior, which models exclusively shape. So we have two forms of prior information. To construct a model which meets all three requirements, we define an undirected graphical model on the joint distribution of all the contours. And the joint probability may be expressed as a product of potentials defined on a subset of contours, which reflect the conditional dependency structure between them. These conditional dependencies can be represented by a graph H, which is induced by the segmentation that we have gotten from mask RCNN. So now remember, that's just the same thing, bringing that over here. So consider the forest scene as follows here, which is full of dead tree crowns. So we're looking for many contours. In the next image, the red circles represent centroids of tree crowns found by the mask RCNN. And then we can add an edge representing the dependency between two contours if the distance between their centroids lies below a threshold. This threshold can be derived from the maximum expected diameter of the tree crown. Above a certain distance, we know that the tree cannot feasibly intersect. So this way we can promote sparsity of the graphical model and reduce computation time. So on the rightmost figure, we see the dependency graph H induced by the mask RCNN segmentation for this scene, just without the forest scene behind it. Now that we've defined the interaction graph, it's time to discuss the specific potentials which form our joint contour model. We use potentials defined on single contours and pairs of contours, so unary and pairwise potentials. And as before, we can transition to considering energy by taking the log. Based on our requirements, we introduce three terms to account for shape, location, and overlap. The shape is a unary term, which corresponds to the non-parametric shape of the model from the single contour case explained before. So that kind of gray sausage thing. The location prior is a set of two-dimensional isotropic Gaussians centered on the tree crown, centroids obtained from the mask RCNN. And finally, we define the overlap term between two contours simply as the negative area of their intersection. So this promotes contours that do not overlap. Now, finally, we can put all of our energy terms together in one happy energy functional. So intuitively, the energy visible here, this whole mess, encodes our expectations for the optimal solution. All contours put together should approximately cover the bright pixels in the probability map and contain as few dark pixels as possible. So that's this image term, and that's an example of, we'll get there. To the shape term, the contour shape should be feasible. In other words, they should be similar to contours that we're seeing during training. Contours should also not overlap. And the centers of the contours should lie near centroids that were discovered by mask RCNN. So that's all these four terms that we went through in the previous slides. But this figure below shows that sample states of high and low energy for each component in the situation where all the other terms are ignored. So attaining a good energy value on one criterion does not necessarily correlate with low energies on the other terms. And actually all of these are not great. Therefore, in order to find a good solution to the problem, it's necessary to simultaneously pay attention to all of the terms during optimization and find a trade-off between the criteria. Any questions? Yeah.
So I'm surprised that you don't have hyperparameters on each term in order to tune the trade-off.
Yet.
Okay.
So this is very, very, very new. We have preliminary results where we do some pretty cool stuff with different shape term using GANs. But anyway, do you mean parameter or hyperparameter?
Hyperparameters.
Okay. Well, now we can get to results. So moving on to the experiment section, let's start by taking a look at the training and evaluation areas. So the dashed line along here is representing the boundaries of the Bavarian Forest National Park. And for our experiment, we manually labeled 250 training and 750 test polygons within adjacent areas of the forest, specifically these regions shown here. And here we see an overview of the training polygons, as well as a close-up, which shows the intricacies of the outlines, which were laboriously labeled by members of our lab. Yeah, good fun. Not me. Then these laboriously labeled training polygons were used as input data to train the three separate components of our framework. The unit, so this is these guys are going into the unit for the corresponding image term. Shouldn't use them. The mask RCNN, that's giving rise to the location term, and the contour shaped prior used for our experiments. In our case, for the experiments, was a classical eigenshape model capturing 98% of the shape variance using the top 32 eigenvectors. So these are just details on that. So you can talk about it later if anyone's curious. So this is a setting of the experiments. The data consisted of that which we just showed earlier, 750 contours from which we could test on from the forest. And the goal of these experiments is to compare the individual tree contour delineation performance between the mask RCNN, which we use as our baseline, and our multi-contour energy-based refinement or active contour model, which we'll call ACM for now. The evaluation was conducted both on the pixel and object level. So on the pixel level, we use the popular intersection over union metric, which measures the similarity of two pixel masks and is expressed as the ratio of the area of their overlap to the area of their union, as shown in that cute little picture. On the object level, we consider a pair of ground truth and detected polygons as matched if their IOU, intersection over union, is at least 0.5. We use these three metrics for quantifying match quality. The mean distance between, so on the object level, we consider a pair of ground truth. The mean distance between centroids match the polygons for the match quality, and the precision is defined as the fraction of detected polygons that was matched to a ground truth polygon. The recall, defined as a fraction of the ground truth polygons, is considered a match, with a match. So here are some results. The left graph shows a distribution of mean centroid distances for both our contour model, shown in blue, and the baseline mask RCNN, shown in orange. Here, the x-axis is the distance between the inferred contour centroids and the reference centroids, and the y-axis shows the corresponding frequency of each method's respective distances. So as we can see, our approach learned centroids that were much closer to the true centroids by nearly a third. So there's a lot more that with very little distance from their centers and the learned centers and the true ones. And that's pretty good because the mask RCNN itself is already pretty good at finding the true centroids. So next, on the right-hand side, we have the results for intersection over union of each method's contours, where the x-axis shows the mean matched IOU, and the y-axis is the corresponding frequency distribution thereof. And what we see is a big improvement of the mean matched IOU of our method over mask RCNN, shown here with the shift. So these results represent an increase in the mean IOU metric by 9 percentage points and a decrease in the mean centroid distance by nearly a third. So moving on to recall and precision results, let's consider these two respective plots. The x-axis, so on the left, the x-axis, actually, nope, x-axis is the same, represents the number of dead trees present in the fixed size input image, which can be understood as a measure of complexity of the input, where the y-axis represents recall and precision, respectively, for that particular scene complexity. As we see, our method, again shown in blue, outperforms mask RCNN for all versions of scene complexity. So especially interestingly, when the scenes are particularly complex, our active contour method can greatly improve in detection recall. So even here, when you have 14 crowns, still doing pretty good. So here we see an example comparison of object contours retrieved by mask RCNN in the middle and our method on the right. Specifically, the white colors, the white pixels represent correctly identified tree crown pixels, whereas false positives and false negatives are shown respectively in red and cyan. So corresponding to the qualitative results just presented, our approach shows more precise and fine outlines of these uniquely shaped tree crowns. So if you look, you see we've got some of these shapes going, actually finding some of these intricacies here. Whereas here it's like blurp, blob, another blob. So cool. And here's another example where there's even more contours going on, and you can see how well we're doing and not doing. There's a lot of room for improvement, but this is a huge improvement over this. So to summarize, deadwood is an important component of the carbon cycle in general and forest ecosystems in particular, with direct implications for mitigating climate change. And our approach combined deep learning and instance segmentation, leveraging state-of-the-art architectures, used like the UNet and mask RCNN to construct a comprehensive energy functional enriched with shape prior information. And the energy drives evolution of dead tree contours and is able to better delineate the tree crowns compared to just using masked RCNN. Yay. So future work, things we're working on and such, our goals are always have efficient and robust, scalable machine learning methods that are able to exploit the wealth of available high-resolution remote sensing imagery, ultimately leading to better understanding of biodiversity and the role of dead wood and its impacts on the environment. In the future, we'd like to apply our method to imagery taken at different points in time to enable accurate change detection of dead trees. Hopefully, this could also lead to models of decay dynamics, dependent on different factors like geographical location and tree species. On the methodological side, we're planning to replace the eigenshape prior with model from class of generative adversarial networks, or GANs, which is alongside variational audio encoders, the state of the art in generative modeling. We already have some preliminary results yielding far more detailed tree crowns, contours. That's pretty cool if anyone's curious later. And finally, introducing GANs might lead to an increase in computational complexity. Therefore, we're interested in sparse GAN variations, which could generate, for example, only the object outlines without wasting resources on the shape's interior, because the energy-based evolution of the contour only alters the shape at the transition between the shape's boundaries, but not inside the shape. So we can save computational resources. That's it. Thank you for your attention and for all of these things.
Okay, great. Questions?
I'd love to hear more about the GAN work. Do you have any bonus slides or anything?
I should have some, yeah. We skip through. Oh yeah, that's showing what eigenshape model is using space invaders, obviously, in case anyone's curious. So yeah, this is showing examples of synthesized space images from style GAN. So this is what it's usually used for. I mean, an example of something it's usually used for. But we can also use it as shape models by learning to generate these masks. So this is having trained a GAN model to generate dead tree crown masks. So these are, on the left, these are polygons from human labeling, so our poor little research assistants. And on the right, these are masks generated by the GAN after training is complete. So pretty cool prior information. I thought I had the results of the contours after we put that in to the pipeline, but do I? Maybe. Oh yeah, well, this is what the pipeline would look like if we included the GAN. So we would be including those shape priors. One more thing. Oh, I do. Cool. Yeah, so this is a comparison of the eigenshape, that thing I described earlier, sort of, versus a GAN-based shape model. So the contours that were learned based on these. So GAN has a potential definitely of preserving more fine contour details. You see how it's already getting into these, like, I don't know what you call those arms of the tree crowns. I think, yeah. So, anything else?
So, yeah, I have one question. So your current work, is it trained on one kind of tree? Or would it work for any kind of tree, or do you have to have that kind of data or change parts of the algorithm?
In theory, it would work for multiple types of trees. We'd have to change some of the parameters, like the distances, like the constraints we have on size of tree, and because, like, you know, some domain knowledge you'd put into it, but the model itself is agnostic for type of tree. So that's something we're definitely interested in, because all the stuff I said at the beginning about sequestration and biodiversity of forest that holds for all types of trees. So this has a potential of being very widely applicable.
Questions? Okay, we still have 5 minutes.
We do? I took forever.
So I'm also wondering whether there would be a need to have like kind of uncertainty quantification and the predictions. Like, do you want to have confidence intervals and or basically like if something is identified as dead, like we want to know how confident the model is in that prediction. And is there anything in between? Is there like a half dead tree? I'm just asking.
If it has any chlorophyll, it will not show up as dead in the CIR imagery. So the chlorophyll is what makes it look red. And whenever that's gone, that's when the tree is dying or dead. It's always at some point of dead that we're interested in, because we care when it's at any point of decay, because at various stages of decay, it can support different animal and plant life, different biodiversity. So all of the different stages of dead are interesting and important.
Okay, great. So let's thank
Thank
Jackie again for the great talk.